Funding for this program is provided by Annenberg CPB to advance excellent teaching.
Why do you think we called it expert jigsaw, Justin?
Because a few people found, everyone found some, and then we all put it together.
Yeah, everyone found something, we put it together. We kind of described it like a potluck dinner.
Moving a student from the point where they're a novice to the point where they're expert enough that they don't need a teacher to look over their shoulder is an individual process.
We get to know each other, we talk about family.
I have to learn about them.
What are their responsibilities to their communities?
All the kids are really good if you just sit down and listen.
I rephrased the question. Maybe the question was wrong.
So that they have an awareness, an education, and a tolerance for other cultures.
You improvise every step of the way.
I know what a certain child's best is, and I expect that.
It makes me feel really happy to be a teacher. I'm kind of choked up.
What do you think of when you hear the word apprentice? Does it make you think of a simpler time when young people learned a trade by working side by side with a master craftsman? It was easy for apprentices to see what they needed to do step by step to learn their craft and become an expert themselves. How could we take this time-honored teaching and learning method and make it work in our classrooms today? I'm Linda Darling Hammond, and that's our challenge for this episode of The Learning Classroom. Today we will look at what we call cognitive apprenticeships. Like historic apprenticeships, teachers model the skills they want their students to master. They lead their students step by step through the parts of the task by scaffolding and supporting their progress. They coach their individual students as they need help, and they ask students to reflect on their work in relation to high standards for quality. Finally, the teacher gradually fades into the background. This is sometimes called de-scaffolding, so that their students can become independent and demonstrate their own expertise. The difference between cognitive apprenticeships and traditional apprenticeships is that the end product is not a candle or a piece of cloth. The end product is knowledge that is demonstrated through an exhibition of intellectual work.
If you think about the old world apprenticeships where, weavers sat with weavers and candle makers sat with candle makers, and what they did initially is they spent a lot of time really observing and being given portions of the task that were within their reach. And then as they learn more of the skills, they are able to more fully participate in whatever the craft or the activity is. So those are some of the aspects of cognitive apprenticeship, that again, you have the expert learner as the teacher, but the teacher is always mindful of ways in which students can take on whatever aspects of the learning they're capable of, and there's always attention being paid to when can the students assume increasing responsibility for this activity.
Darryl Robbins, a 5th and 6th grade teacher at Birmingham Covington School, uses a kind of cognitive apprenticeship to help her students develop literacy skills. To help them become expert readers and book critics, she engages them in book clubs. As they read and critique the books they have chosen, she models, supports, and coaches her students, helping them learn to read critically, evaluate what they've read, and discuss their ideas respectfully. Let's take a look.
Anyone have a good book recommendation?
Oh, I do.
Anyone? Steven?
It's sort of like a whole story, and there's main characters like Martin the Warrior.
The kids do a lot of writing about themselves. We read books that I know they're going to relate to right away, so they'll talk about themselves.
There's a princess and a sister.
If they don't feel comfortable, then they're not really going to be able to function within a group. They're going to be more inhibited. So we do a lot of that at the beginning of the year. Team building, trust activities. Reminders about just book club in general. How many people are in your group? 3 or 4. You want to pick people with whom you feel comfortable sharing things. Also just think about your general behavior and what people in the class help you to do your best. Okay, so you've got kind of two big things you're thinking about. You don't just start off saying to the kids, talk about this book. I think you have to move in baby steps.
Yeah, but each thing, I think it relates to each other in a way.
At the beginning of the year, there is less talk, because I think you have to teach kids how to talk the way you want them to talk. You have to give them the verbiage. You have to teach kids how to disagree with one another peacefully. I always talk about peaceful coexistence with the kids. You have to talk about the talk, if that makes sense.
He's there in like her heart and her brain.
I seriously disagree with that. I mean,
well, I know she'd like it if he were physically there, but it's hard to explain, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what do you think, Tim? I'm curious. You always have great ideas. Let's hear it.
I've heard enough related Justin's gibberish.
I can't.
Do you think she's making the wrong choice by talking about him?
No. I just disagree with his statement. She likes it. What do you say? That he thinks she likes it better that Hamid's not physically there.
Yeah, but I'm not saying all the time. I'm saying just sometimes. It's hard to explain.
I think you have to go through all of the things that you anticipate might come up within a group and then model those.
And I got out of Lob's Girl because this kind of made more sense.
But did you like Lob's Girl better as a story?
Yeah.
Me too.
Daryl has carefully structured the process of learning so that her students can gradually take charge. Did you notice how she insisted on groups no larger than 3 or 4? That was to ensure that all students would have a responsibility to be part of the conversation. She also set up the conversations and modeled the kinds of questions students might raise. You may have noticed how she drew out the quieter students through questioning and assisted students in learning how to talk to one another. In this next activity, Daryl helps students take responsibility for their own learning and that of their peers through what is called an expert jigsaw. In this activity, students research different aspects of a topic in order to teach it to others. The students become experts using assistance from each other as well as the teacher. As the students take over the teaching, you'll notice how Daryl fades and gives them more and more responsibility.
And you are not going to have to look up everything, okay? We did that at the beginning where everyone was looking up everything, and I'm pretty sure now that you've got the map skills that you don't need to be doing that. We're going to do the same thing that we did with China, and we called it expert jigsaw. Do you remember that? Why do you think we called it expert jigsaw? Justin?
Because a few people found, everyone found some, and then we all put it together.
Yeah, everyone found something, we put it together. We kind of described it like a potluck dinner, where you bring the salad, you bring the meatloaf. The basis for expert jigsaw is shared responsibility, shared ownership. In the case of our maps, each child feels like he or she contributed to this terrific map that we have in our classroom. Would this be sharing? I'll find Egypt and then I'll tell you.
No.
What would take place if you were sharing? Expert jigsaw equalizes locate something like that. Learning a little bit. Because regardless of your ability level, you're still contributing to whatever the task was as a whole. So you know that without you, we couldn't have gotten there. Whether you're more advanced and you did a huge chunk, or you're struggling and you just did a small piece, it was a piece.
Libyan desert.
I found it. Okay.
Where is that? It's right by Egypt.
So I think kids are quick to thank each other for contributions, and kids know that everyone played a role, regardless of ability level or other factors. Everybody helped us get to the point where we are now. And definitely, I think that is a community.
Right there, yeah. But again, I think I agree more with Tarek, even though...
I seat my students in groups so that they're almost forced to look at each other. And every child in the classroom is seated so he or she is looking at another child instead of me. There are certainly moments where I need them looking at me and making eye contact so I know they're actively listening. But during work times, they're facing each other. And I move around to help, but ultimately, when they look up for help, it's a student sitting across from them. And I think that makes a big difference. I don't think I realized that right away, that how they're seated really does make a difference. I think that the students are very focused on ask the teacher for help. Bedouin.
Yeah, how do you spell that?
Where could you find that? And I always say to my kids, try 3 resources before you get to me. Sometimes that resource is a book. Sometimes it's, another actual object that we have in the classroom, and sometimes that's someone else. If you're not sure how to spell a word, maybe you could ask 3 friends before me. We call it 3 before me. Israel.
Oh, can I please tell?
Give her a clue. Like in relationship to?
It's west. It's the country exactly west of Jordan, north of Egypt, south of Syria, and southwest of Lebanon.
It would definitely be faster if I just answered their question. But part of what I'm doing is not only helping that child to engage in dialogue with another child, but I'm also hoping that the child who answers their question will be kind of validating what he or she knows. In repeating something or explaining it, I think you're solidifying what you know. So I'm hoping it will help both kids involved in that process.
Okay, so somewhere on the stage. You're right.
I think when kids discover something on their own or with a friend, they feel like they own it. They're proud of the partnership, they're proud of the process, and they can talk about the process in terms of how they got to where they are now. They can say, at the beginning of the hour I thought this, but then I talked with a friend and now I think this. I can't believe I've totally changed what I thought, or I'm different than I was an hour ago. If I tell them something, it's, are we going to be tested on this? It's more that kind of thing.
Mao created the Red Guards, and they would kill people, and he just took over China, really, and nobody really had any say. He would just say, like, you die, you stay alive. The Red Guards killed many of his
community
people.
learning, I think, is often the foundation upon which the individual learning is based. You learn as a community. That's a lot of times when you're introducing new things or looking at varied perspectives. Individual learning is important too, though, because everyone's at a different place in their learning, and kids need to pick up from where they are. You need to start your individual learning at a place that's right for you.
Great job, Kylie.
What we just saw does not happen magically by the teacher just turning over the classroom to the students. Daryl prepared her students step by step so the transition came naturally. First, she modeled both the social and academic skills she expected her students to master, including how to give and offer help. Then she scaffolded the learning process, watching and intervening when she saw a student needing assistance. She coached students about how to find the information they needed and showed them how to help each other. In the end, she guided her students toward the production of knowledge they felt they owned. Presenting what they had learned motivated the students and increased their sense of investment in the content. The presentations also create a sense of standards in the classroom. As their work becomes public, students develop an idea of what they should be striving for.
So the teacher is the expert learner in cognitive apprenticeship. And by that I mean the teacher is trying to think about the ways in which he or she thinks that will be useful to advancing the student's thinking. They're trying to think about the array of tools that will be useful to advancing students' learning, whether those tools are texts or hypermedia or setting up interviews, providing language for the students that will help them to communicate their ideas effectively with one another.
Making thought processes transparent is easier said than done, and yet this is crucial for helping students develop expertise. Pete Shaheen teaches writing to 11th and 12th graders at Birmingham Seaholm High School. He too applies cognitive apprenticeship strategies. He models the thinking and decision-making processes that writers go through as they create a text. Pete does not break down the writing process into standardized steps that you might expect. Instead, based on what we know about how real writers work, he allows the students to develop their own approaches, using tips about different strategies and feedback from their colleagues as a guide. As he steers this process, the students take on increasing responsibility until they are leading portions of the class themselves.
You read your piece, and then we do the 5-minute discussion, right? Remember that there are certain ways that we start out, and remember that after you read your piece, your role is severely limited in what you do. And today we're going to do a little bit of a modification, and that modification is simply this, that I will also participate in the response with you guys, okay?
Somewhere in the distance I hear the sound of a violin. Soft and passionate, the sound washes over me and I feel compelled to follow it. It drowns me with a taunting melody. I can't breathe or think. All I want to do is listen forever. Slowly I open my eyes to take...
Cognitive apprenticeship is a process that a teacher uses to model learning and to transfer the ownership of that learning style from the teacher to the student. Specifically, cognitive apprenticeship, as it might work in writing, for example, is finding a way for students to respond to each other's writing through maybe a systematic approach to looking at a text.
I thought maybe starting from the beginning with her as her normal life, like her as a farm girl, poor, struggling. Maybe that way we would like her more, because then she would have this is her dream. She deserves this. She's worked hard all her life. That would be a way for us, the reader, to, be more attached to her and like her.
In teaching, and in particular the teaching of writing, what you have to be able to understand is, at first, writing is a process that varies from individual to individual. Now, what used to happen is there used to be a four-step process that we tried to impose on all writers. As we got more sophisticated and began to look really at how writers write and how we get the best out of ourselves, we began to find out that, our progress as writers really wasn't quite so linear. It was more circular.
She described the clothing so well, so maybe link the clothing or like the rubies to like him, or like, link to him is you always see him at this place and then explain one of them, so.
A single ruby on another gold chain rests in the hollow of my throat. I notice that it is an intricate rose pattern before raising my hands to push the doors open. Before I can even touch them, they swing away and I walk into the next room.
The way that I begin it is, first of all, through observation. I let students talk, and I look at what students do in seminar and how they come to seminar, and then one day I'll just say, okay, today is your seminar. I'm not going to say a word.
Suddenly the realization of what's happening hits me and I stop dead. My heart pounds and becomes frozen in place. I don't even know if I should be here. I don't even know what's going on. I don't know why that melody is so spellbinding. I start to feel the cold grips of fear surround me. At the same time, I can't stop watching him.
Before we move on to our next reader, let me suggest again that we all have an obligation to one another to jump in. Okay? And if that puts a little pressure on you, that's okay too, but I need you to jump in, and I need you. We can't make decisions about what we're going to do to our writing if we don't have the input. That's why we all have to jump in. It's part of our obligation as listeners, and it's part of our need as writers is to get that feedback.
Like the lines that really got to me were when they were talking about the 6 kids, and do you even remember their names? And why did I leave? Yeah, that was so sad. It's just sort of the mood of the whole thing, even in all the confusion.
In the beginning of the year, I'm more text-driven. I'm trying to help students develop the experience, build the bridges from their own experience to text so that they can continue to build bridges. Now, at some point of the year, they're going to understand for themselves how to build bridges from text.
We decided that we didn't spend that much time on the 5 senses. And because it's so important, because you use it the perceptual voyage, the, what else do you use it for? When
Imagery?
you're exploding the moment, like all the other writer's tricks, you need the 5 senses. So what we decided to do is we're going to have 5 different stations where you're going to like test out one of the 5 senses. So we need you guys to have a piece of paper and a pencil so you can write too.
There's never really a clear process in terms of scaffolding and unscaffolding. I would say the process is continuous. You're constantly building up the scaffold and reflecting about how you got there. So it's through that reflection that you're able to build more and solidify your foundations, I think. So when I ask them questions about how you get to your decision, I'm really asking them to be reflective.
So, and then you write. Maybe put your left hand in there and write with your right hand.
Write about what I feel?
Yeah, like how it feels. Like, you know, is it smooth? Is it like, nothing like sharp in there. It's not going to hurt you.
Vinny, you're supposed to write out emotion. And use descriptive words that focus on smell. Nothing else, just smell.
Moving a student from the point where they're a novice to the point where they're expert enough that they don't need a teacher to look over their shoulder is, again, an individual process. Every student is a little bit different. Some students barely need to be nudged at all, and others need, I think, more prodding. But the signs that I think I find of a student who's ready to move on, first of all, look at the reading that a student does. If you have a reading that you hand out to students and they come back to class and they make notes in the margins of the reading and they have questions, that's a pretty good indication that they're engaging in the material and that they're beginning to get themselves ready to move on in the process. Another sign is you just listen to the student. Is the student willing to take some risks?
Okay. Well, in our writing, it's important to include many of the senses. And sometimes people neglect to do sound, one of the very important senses, and it can evoke a lot of emotion into your writing. And I think it's important that that we include this. So I have a CD here. I want you all to listen to it. Imagine you're in the middle of it and write about it and try to emphasize the sense in your writing. And yeah, just go crazy.
Writing plays an interesting role in the apprenticeship of students learning here. And the reason it plays an interesting role is it's different than some traditional notions would have it. It used to be writing was a solitary activity, but writing is a collective, collaborative effort now. We'll sit in response groups after we have a seminar like this, and we'll jot down our ideas. At the end of class today, I said, go home and write about what you think is the ethical use of language. And now we'll come back and we'll talk together about what is their perception based on their papers. And we'll critique one another in the same sort of democratic forum that we had, where students will be asked to defend their ideas.
What's the word I'm looking for? It almost seemed like it was just broken down to just the bare thoughts, exactly what you were thinking. There wasn't a lot of mindless words, so to speak. It was more as if you were saying exactly what was on your mind without trying to put it in any kind of formal format.
To pick on you, but you said you had a lot of cool imagery, right?
Right.
Okay, so if you could give us an example. Now this is why it's important, because as we know, writing is revision, right? Sometimes you've got to cut out a really good part of writing to save the piece.
If I'm going to say that, then I'd have to say that, especially that first introductory part, the imagery, the way it followed, like I could really follow that well. And just in terms of the imagery, not in terms of what it was trying to say, but in terms of the imagery, I can follow that well. So.
And that gives her more information, doesn't it? When she goes to make those revisions, it helps her weigh what she's going to cut. Authentic learning is repeatable. It's something that happens over time. It's something that allows for failure and then allows for people to retry and rebuild. It becomes a state of mind.
Another characteristic of a cognitive apprenticeship is always being mindful of ways in which you're trying to cede control of the learning to the learners. And so you see that, I think, wonderfully illustrated in Mr. Shaheen's class, because the students are working in small groups. They're responsible for a lot of the design work, how they're going to demonstrate what they've learned, how they're going to communicate to others. He's touching base with them about the processes by which they're learning or engaging in this, but it's clear to me that his emphasis is really on imparting control to the students for this learning activity.
Students' accomplishments in this kind of classroom may look almost effortless, but they're made possible by the nearly invisible structures the teacher puts in place. Pete Shaheen figures out what kind of guidance to give and when to let students stretch out on their own by watching and listening closely for clues about what they understand and where they are struggling. While he is quick to offer support as needed, reminding students of what to look for in their writing, and modeling strategies where they are timely, he is equally quick to back off. This is the concept we call fading. It encourages his students' independence.
So their expectation is that students are going to be successful given adequate support, rather than kind of piecemeal or providing more support and kind of nudging children along. Set up challenging tasks, know what you're looking for, know what children are bringing to this because you've watched children carefully, you've listened to children's thinking and their ideas, and then you can make decisions about, all right, given where I want them to go, what kinds of support or assistance are they going to need? Whether that's basic skills in reading and writing or oral language, or other resources that they can use, or other contexts, more powerful activities that will help them to attain those goals.
Much of the momentum for students' efforts in a cognitive apprenticeship is the real-world context for their learning. When our students see the larger purpose behind what they're practicing in class, they're much more motivated to master these lessons and apply them creatively in their everyday lives. This is the Learning Classroom. Thanks for watching.
Funding for this program is provided by Annenberg CPB to advance excellent teaching.